Hi everybody. At long last, we're seeing restrictions eased in Melbourne. Further easing was announced for 27 October and then more apparently on 8 November. And what we've observed to date from the data suggests that Melbourne real estate markets will emerge strongly from the second lockdown and get back to business where possible with some enthusiasm. The data suggests that to date, Melbourne markets have shown considerable resilience throughout the tough times of 2020. A collapse in property values was predicted by some economists and nothing remotely like that has happened. So as Melbourne gets back to normal, or some kind of normal, where to for the city's property markets? And to provide some answers to that general question, there's no one better qualified than award-winning buyer's agent and best-selling author, Miriam Sandkuhler from Property Mavens. Miriam, welcome.
Hi, Terry. Great to be here.
Indeed. Well, I guess it's not so great to be in Melbourne, but it's getting a little bit greater as the days go by.
Yeah, I'm very excited to hear the restaurants are opening up again. As soon as we finish our presentation, I'll be Googling and making some online bookings, and I can bet you everyone else will be as well.
Yeah, I bet. And just the opportunity to go out and shop like a normal person, how good will that be?
Oh, look, I think going to retail and actually physically trying on clothes instead of potluck with online shopping will be much more enjoyable than, collecting packages and having to send them back half the time. But look, I think any degree of normality and just the ability to reconnect with people, to socialise, to engage, and to get out of what is isolation for many, particularly people who are living alone and working alone, it's just going to make a massive difference to people's mental health and their way of being.
My feeling has always been, having observed real estate markets around Australia for so many decades, that Melbourne is, well, for me, it's the strongest market in Australia. If we make a sweeping statement across time, Melbourne is always the strongest city for me economically and with real estate. And my feeling is that given the opportunity, real estate consumers are going to just jump back in and do the things that they've been prevented from doing for many months. Is that your feeling as well?
Look, absolutely, there are signs of that happening. However, March next year will be a different story potentially. But look, we've got lots of great content to share today. I want to impart as much value as possible. There's an opportunity at the end of our presentation to take away some free resources. So why don't we start?
Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, so first I'll just make a disclaimer out there that we're not going to be giving any financial, tax, legal or property advice, and I certainly strongly recommend that everyone seek their own independent advice. So just be aware of that. And look, let's start a little bit with who we are. We are a multi-award winning and industry recognised property advocacy firm. Our expertise is buyer advocacy and vendor advocacy. So we work with clients of all ages to help them buy and sell smart, enabling them to achieve all their desired outcomes and to seamlessly move forward onto the next chapter of their lives. So we find and buy what I call high-performing investment-grade homes and investment property, help people find the right property for their budget, and we help people appoint the right agent with the right skill set and the right attributes to sell their property as well. A little bit about me very quickly. I am a licensed real estate agent working as an advocate. I'm an accredited property investment advisor, best-selling author, media commentator, and I do have a special offer on my book at the end of the presentation too. So where to for Melbourne? So this is what we're going to cover today in our webinar. Like, where are we now? What are the conditions on the ground that I'm seeing? What's likely to happen in the short term? What to look out for? Changes in the market and what to target. So where are we now? Well, we've kind of got two different markets going on at the moment. Melbourne Metro is operating very differently to the regional sector. If I talk about the metro sector, private inspections are allowed again. We are having, between 4 and 6 people attending inspections on an hourly basis. Some agents are only giving people 10 minutes to make a multi-$100,000 decision. Other agents are giving us 15 minutes. We're back to live auctions again with up to 10 people, registered bidders able to attend. Now, I am actually seeing some agents try and do a combination of both, where they're trying to set up a combination of live as well as online for those that can't attend. And I've even experiencing some agents who can go back to do live auctions refusing to. They're preferring to use some of the platforms out there, some of which actually aren't transparent, and I personally or professionally object to. But unfortunately, we can't do much about that. So Yeah, the methodology of how properties will be sold moving forward by auction will be interesting, and we'll see how many agents want to hang on to the online stuff versus how many want to go back to the live. From November 23rd, all auctions and inspections will be allowed with some more safety measures, and that will be an expanded version of what we've got now. And then by contrast, if we look at the regional areas, you know, they're in a different stage to us. They do have, for example, COVID-19 health and safety restrictions in place when they've got people inspecting properties, but they don't have the same rigidity of what we've got in Victoria, and they don't have the same limitation on numbers of people that can inspect. And certainly in a lot of regional centres, they don't necessarily do auctions. It'll depend on a market by market basis. And they're just continuing as they are with very, very high increased demand. There are people who are doing a tree change and a sea change, and they're well and truly heading out to the regions and driving up demand in those areas. So if we look at conditions on the ground, well, 2020 has been awful for some people, particularly their financial circumstances. A lot of people are suffering at the moment, but there are many people who've actually got through fairly well. They still have a job, they still have income coming in, they've refinanced their properties, they've got higher cash flow available than what they had before now. And certainly, as you identified, Terry, market prices haven't crashed. They might have gone down across the board around 3.5%. But certainly we've seen lots of first home buyers have jumped into the market and they're sensing a pricing opportunity. And we can see this on this chart here, you know, to the right-hand side where investors have dropped sharply and first home buyers are really coming back into the market. So there are some state and federal government incentives. They're turning up the incentives, especially for building new properties. And certainly the first home buyers are probably poised to exceed their numbers that came about during the GFC first home buyer rush. And again, the demand is being, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask you, Miriam, I've been a bit bemused of the relative inactivity of investors. We have seen first home buyers, probably one of the strongest cohorts in the market as well, and other types of owner occupiers are active too. So where markets are strong around Australia, it's very much owner-occupier driven, but investors kind of sitting on the fence. Do you ever feel for why they're so reticent? Because there certainly are opportunities that are going begging at the moment.
Yeah, well, probably 20% of my clients I'm working with at the moment are investors. The bulk are home buyers, first home buyers, upgraders. I've got some downsizers selling and doing the vendor advocacy as well. I think investors are taking a little bit more of a cautious approach. Some of them in particular are looking at their situation on job security. I mean, I know I've got some clients on my books who are actually on hold and have been for 6 months because they don't have certainty around having a job, you know, in the next 3, 6, 12 months themselves, or businesses are going through restructuring and they're taking a while to come about with, you know, final solutions. So some people are cautious. And there's still uncertainty ahead. I mean, come March next year when JobKeeper and JobSeeker come to an end, as is currently indicated, there's really the truth of the economic situation across the country will really come to the fore. You know, we've got that buffering happen now, but I think there's a possibility some people are waiting for a bit of blood on the street. And unfortunately, there's always an element of people who want to take advantage of situations. It doesn't mean that good quality is going to come to the market. It may not necessarily be good quality that people particularly want to buy. But I think definitely investors are feeling less urgency than home buyers, and they're taking their time and they're looking and they're waiting.
Okay.
So back to what I was talking about with the demand. Well, there's been a build-up of demand from, as we said, first home buyers, but also home owners who sold earlier in the year. And there's also been a build-up of vendors needing to sell where they haven't been able to sell either. So there is an interesting dynamic going on. We've had a lot of property hit the market very recently in recent weeks, and we're anticipating seeing more of that leading into Christmas. So, well, what's likely to happen in the short term? Well, I'm expecting big jumps in activity when the market reaches significant open dates, when things open up a lot more than they have in the past. Melbourne's listings have been rising for the last 3 weeks in anticipation of things loosening up in terms of all the restrictions. And there's a good chance that we'll actually see a big momentum towards Christmas as motivated buyers and sellers are rushing in. And as I said, towards March, at the end of JobKeeper, we'll get a true picture of where the market's at and how the economy is going to be affected. And that's going to include obviously seeing an increase in listings as well coming to the market.
So we've, spring, as it normally happens, just hasn't been able to happen. So there must be a lot of pent up, both buyers and sellers out there just sort of waiting. And I was sort of half expecting kind of an explosion of activity in Melbourne, given Melbourne's enthusiasm for real estate and what they haven't been able to do what they would normally do in spring. Do you feel that's likely to happen?
Look, I mean, there's definitely more properties being listed. One of the challenges is when people have got tenants in their properties, if a tenant turns around and says, I've got a cold, you can't come in, it can really derail a sales campaign. So there are some challenges with tenants in rented properties that are going to the market that are making it difficult to get access to it and to sell. I certainly anticipate that we're not going to have a normal Christmas and a normal January. Traditionally, everyone would work like hell leading up to Christmas and then take 2 or 3 weeks off over the Christmas January period. And it's unlikely that's going to happen this year. Number one, because we can't go anywhere other than local. Number two, all the local accommodation over the Christmas period has already been booked up at extremely high prices, and a lot of people aren't going to be able to afford to go away anywhere. And those that are going to be around, more so than ever before, and I've experienced a number of Christmases in Melbourne, which have always been fantastic because there's hardly anyone about and it's a really pleasant environment, but that won't be the case this year. And I certainly think there'll definitely be deals happening between Christmas and New Year and well and truly into the January and February period, more so than what we've ever seen before, because vendors are trying to make up for lost time, buyers are trying to make up for lost time, and of course agents are trying to make up for months without being able to work as well.
Okay.
So what to look out for? I'm not expecting a lot of investors back in the market initially, as I was saying, because I think there's a bit more caution and they're going to wait and see what happens, particularly after March. But if the market is seen to be gaining momentum, well, definitely we can see numbers rise in 2021 and particularly of investors. But as I said, I'm expecting to see a lot of substandard properties coming to the market as vendors are going to look to offload them. So particularly watch out for the rental market. We've got a lot of distressed tenants and my industry contacts are telling me there's a wave of vacate notices hitting property managers' desks at the moment. So we're going to have a lot of vendors who may have lost their job. They may not be able to cash flow a vacant property. It may not be a great quality property in terms of tenancy. If it's, one of 50 apartments in an apartment building sitting empty and renters can pick and choose, there may be real issues there. And again, equally, it may be very difficult for those vendors to offload those properties as well. So I would suggest that if someone's an investor, they really take their time and be patient and look around for A-grade property, not C-grade property. Terry, as you know, a bad property at a discount is still a bad property, and a bad property at a discount that hasn't made any money or capital growth in recent years is unlikely to continue to do so because there are no growth drivers necessarily there to support that. So again, investors need to be aware of that as well.
And how would you categorise the property on the screen right now?
That's a Z-grade property. Certainly that is a substandard property, and I wouldn't suggest anyone buy that for the house. They're probably looking to buy the land there. They're buying for land value only. They're going to bowl it and they're going to build or develop. Okay, so changes in the market. So interestingly with COVID, obviously there's been a substantial impact globally. We've seen migration drop substantially. We've seen a lot of interstate migration, a lot of people leaving Victoria and heading north or heading west. So that's been interesting. Those, I've known people where they've just decided professionally to go off to Darwin for a 2-week holiday, do their lockdown and then take off to Queensland and have a nice holiday or relocate there with work. So there's some interesting stuff going on at the moment, but certainly overseas migration has come to a grinding halt, except for expats who are coming back home. and that may drive some of the owner-occupier market over time. We've got overseas students who obviously have been big drivers of the market in recent years, but that's dried up. There's a whole inner city high-rise unit market looking to be oversupplied, and that's underwhelmed with demand, as I mentioned before. And work from home will fall gradually, but it's likely to settle at higher levels than before. So I know statistically, I think Bernard Salt, our well-known demographer friend, did a presentation recently where he was saying about 3% of people generally are work from home. He said during the pandemic, it's increased to roughly 40%, and he expects that probably to settle back down to maybe the 8%, 9% mark after the dust settles with everything and everyone goes back to work. So there'll be a slight shift in work from home, but maybe not as big a driver as everyone anticipates. And yes, definitely people might be looking to build properties with a built-in study, or they might be looking to upgrade with an extra bedroom that they can turn into a study. But there'll also be a large percentage of people that aren't interested in doing that, don't have the budget for it, and they'll still buy according to what their needs are. So what to target? Oh, there you go. I left the image out of that one. That wasn't very helpful, was it? Where's that gone? No. All right. Well, I'll just have to talk to a blank screen. Actually, I can probably insert a picture, but I'll leave that for the moment. So family homes in established middle and outer suburbs with transport will likely do the best. So if you think about places, for anyone who knows Victoria, places like Ringwood and Doncaster, where they've got access, well, Ringwood in particular, access to train station, shopping town. You've got that massive shopping complex there with cinemas and restaurants and shops and fruit and veg and the whole lot. You know, it's like its own little centre, plus really good access from a public transport point of view. Doncaster shopping town, same. They're building a Bunnings there at the moment. That development's getting bigger and bigger. The one thing they just lack is a train station. But still they've got the ride, what is it, park and ride to get into the CBD. But given we're now talking about maybe not as many people being based out of the CBD, it's those middle to outer ring areas with those amenities. Glen Waverley, the Glen Shopping Centre is the same. They're going to start drawing a lot more people to those areas because the commute times are likely to be substantially less than what people have been experiencing under normal working conditions to date. So if people can look for well-built, either established apartments and townhouses in some of those middle and inner suburbs, they could fare quite well. Look for open living floor plans with a good aspect, yard, courtyard or balcony. And just beware, plenty of vendors will be looking to offload poorly built and poor performing properties. So just understand, again, there's a distinction for A grade and B grade. I've been on some of the forums lately and I'm still seeing people asking about whether or not they should buy house and land packages. And again, I'd still avoid any new estates, particularly where there's an ongoing supply of land to be released, because there's a likelihood of oversupply developing in the next few years, particularly if they're, you know, further out again. And yeah, just take all of that into consideration. So that's kind of it in summary, Terry. Do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. I had some questions around the size and the impact of the expat factor. Those who, for various reasons, wanting to come back, or perhaps buying in advance of coming back. What's actually happening with all of that?
Well, look, I have been working with some expats based out of Hong Kong. I think what's happening, my understanding is there's roughly 22,000 expats who are looking to relocate back home to Australia, and obviously they're struggling to get flights. Many of them possibly already have houses here. Some of them don't. Some of them will have to come back and work and prove income to qualify to borrow money to get a loan to purchase. Others may be coming back cashed up. I know a lot of them will probably come through Western Australia and do their quarantine there. So it's really just a case of everyone's individual circumstances, but I don't doubt that with what's going on with COVID in Europe, many expats are relocating to come back home permanently. Yes, that will drive demand, but of course it will depend on their personal circumstances, their budget, whether or not they have family, if they're moving home or if they're moving into another state, another city, and where the job opportunities are. Are they coming back to a job and employment? Because if they are, and again, depending on do they have to be based in the city or can they base themselves in the outer suburban areas, that'll be interesting. Recently, I've worked with a number of immigrant first home buyers, more mature, a little bit older, haven't bought in Australia before, don't know the tricks and traps and what can happen and how things can go wrong. And as you know, I've written about that in the first 40 pages of my book. So I've been fielding a lot more inquiry from those types of first home buyers who, it's the first time they're buying property in Australia, but they're cashed up. They've got good budgets, anything between $800 to $1 million, and there's great opportunities for them, but they still have to make informed decisions and be wary of what not to buy, as well as understanding what to buy. So ironically, locally, there's strong demand from that market as well.
One of the things that provides impetus to the Melbourne market is the strength of overseas migrants coming into Melbourne, more so to Melbourne than any other part of Australia, and that tap has been turned off. Does this expat factor have the power to mitigate the problems that the lack of overseas migrants might cause?
Possibly not. I mean, I think Melbourne, we've had 100,000 people on average immigrating to Melbourne over a 10-year period. So no, 20,000 expats coming back isn't going to make up for the lack of immigration. And we're having some net migration out of Victoria as well, which, hey, those of us that are local may think that's not a bad thing from a congestion point of view, with traffic and transport and infrastructure not necessarily having kept up for a number of years. But no, it's gonna take a while before the market probably gets back to where it was at the level that it was escalating, because that demand was really driving so much of that growth. So we've got this concentrated short-term demand right now leading up to Christmas and into the new year, and then we'll just have to reassess where things are at with the market in March.
Okay.
But absolutely everyone that can borrow money now at such incredibly low interest rates, and they probably haven't been this low for 20 years, are doing what they can to get into the market. Other people are refinancing and freeing up cash, and that is to upgrade, and that's also for some people to use to invest as well.
Okay. So I know that you're very busy in normal times in regional markets within maybe 1 to 2 hours of Melbourne, and that's looking particularly strong at the moment, while Melbourne's struggling for obvious reasons. Some of those regional markets like Ballarat and Bendigo are just pumping. Is that what you're experiencing?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm obviously still buying there. I've got boots on the ground and staff based in those cities for me or with me. And properties are still turning over really quickly. Sometimes they're selling on the same day that they're listed. So, if you aren't local and you can't get there, then I do recommend you engage a buyer's advocate specialising in that area, because you just simply can't compete with the fact that local first home buyers are buying. You've got upgraders that are buying and selling. You've got investors that are still buying there. I'm working with investor clients at the moment regionally. And then you've got Melbourne metro buyers, first home buyers in particular, who've never been able to afford really to buy in Melbourne, but suddenly for $300,000-400,000, they can go and get a 2-3 bedroom house in a good little suburb in somewhere like Ballarat and Bendigo. And they can work from home 3 days a week, and they've got permission to commute 2 days a week, and they're driving demand as well.
Yeah. I'm still aware that with investors, there's still some pushback with the idea of buying in regions. This die-hard attitude that you've got to be in the big cities to get growth. What's your response to that kind of mentality?
Well, look, I've certainly got clients, ironically, because I'll do an analysis of a number of clients and case studies over the years, over 6, 7, 8 years, just to see how their property's performing. And without a doubt, regional properties have been averaging between 8 to 12% capital growth per annum. Now, these are A-grade regional properties that I've bought, but nevertheless, compared to the market median, they have totally outperformed the market. And in some instances, they've outperformed Metro Melbourne as well. Just simply because what I bought, where I bought it, the value in terms of bang for buck that you get for your money. As a consequence, the yields are definitely starting to go down. Just because prices escalate regionally doesn't mean rents keep up with it, because you're dealing with a particular demographic and they're earning a certain level of income. So I think the yield play that used to be there isn't as high now, and anyone expecting to buy from an investment point of view probably can't be hoping for a 4 to 5% yield. They may only be getting, depending again on what they're buying and what their budget is, they may get somewhere between 3.5 to 4.5 or 5, depending on price point. So, you know, the higher you get, your $500,000-$600,000 properties, you might be looking at a 3.5% yield. If you're spending less than that for cash flow purposes for investing, you might be getting that 4.5% yield, 5 if you're lucky. But it'll depend on price point, suburb, and all those variables that go with it.
Okay, so we're seeing very good performance from some regional markets in recent years, and the trends, such as the trend of people moving to the regions, working remotely, a scenario you've just described, would tend to indicate that that's going to continue. But as always, it's not a case of just go out and buy somewhere regional. It obviously needs to be good regional. What are the parameters that you apply in terms of a location that, yes, it's good for investors to buy, and opposed to those, the answer is no?
Yeah, well, you've got to understand your local market. I mean, the local regional market doesn't live the way we do in Metro Melbourne. You know, they don't need a coffee shop on their doorstep that they can walk to in 5 minutes. So it's a totally different way of living up there. They're happy to get in their car and drive. It doesn't mean buy 20 kilometres out, but, you know, it's not the same lifestyle desirability. I mean, yes, people want cafes and restaurants and nice things like that, but it's not about walking distance to any of that. So it's just a different bit of a lifestyle expectation. Certainly being in good suburbs where you've got good schools and education, you've got proximity to the CBD, you've got proximity to amenity, you've got proximity to public transport and the train station, all of that's still good. But then, of course, it comes down to the individual property in its own right. Plus, like anywhere, certainly Ballarat's got some suburbs where there are parts of the suburb that are excellent. There are other parts you absolutely don't want to go anywhere near. So people really need to do the research and understand where they're buying and drill down really deep to get almost a street-by-street understanding of the suburb that they're looking to purchase in, to make sure that they're not going to make an expensive mistake.
I had an investor ask me the question recently, someone out of Melbourne who's very aware of the importance of school zones in Melbourne, whether that actually applies in places like Ballarat and Bendigo. And I had to actually go and look for an answer. Apparently it is a factor there as well, that school zones exist, and it can be an influence on growth and choices of where you buy.
Yeah, not to the extent that it is in Melbourne. I mean, certainly in Melbourne, people will pay up to a 10% premium to be in a particular school zone. I haven't experienced that to the same extent in the regional areas. It doesn't mean to say that there aren't some zones that are better than others, and people do definitely want to buy in areas because of those school zones. And they tend to be paying market prices for the suburb rather than the school zone, if that makes sense, because people that are buying will know that zone's there. But, you know, you've got a really diverse mix of diverse demographic living in and around Ballarat. And you've also got private schools as well. You've got plenty of recognised private schools with borders from, you know, Melbourne metro areas and other regional surrounds as well, if I'm thinking Ballarat. So, yes, it makes a difference, but not to the same extent that you would expect it to in metro Melbourne.
Okay. Just turning back to Melbourne, I know you have a lot of criteria, a lot of boxes that you need to tick before you're going to say yes to a property for a customer. In the current circumstances with lockdown and closed borders, overseas migrants can't come anymore. Has anything changed in that, or do the fundamentals still apply? So locational choices don't fundamentally change despite the circumstances.
Well, the fundamentals still apply. You know, I say to clients all the time that A-grade properties will hold their value in a downturn, and they'll be the first ones to escalate in an upturn, and that's very much the case. You know, I bought an A-grade property for a client recently in Heidelberg, and it was very unique in what it was. And certainly when it came to me appraising it and then deciding where we needed to be to purchase it under competition. I certainly applied strategy to give my client the best advantage possible. I put in an offer which forced an online auction within 48 hours, and there were 9 bidders that attended that auction. Now, we ultimately bought that property, but that's an example of an A-grade property still being in high demand. In that case, very low supply, and what it was and the features of that particular property. It was basically a townhouse on a house-sized block of land with a lovely aspect outdoors. And yeah, that was reflected in the level of interest in the property and the number of people that attended the auction, the online auction.
And do I gather from some of your earlier comments that you're actually expecting Christmas to be quite a busy period for real estate, when normally it perhaps goes a little bit quiet, that it's going to be different this year?
Yeah, I think between Christmas, New Year, and then early into January and February, I think there'll still be quite a few deals being done. Like I said, a lot of people won't be going away because, we can't get out of the state, and a lot of that Christmas accommodation is already booked, as I said, and a lot of it's, been rented for quite the premium because a lot of places are making up the income that they weren't able to earn earlier on. So yeah, there'll be people who are going to be knuckling down, staying local and still looking to buy, regardless of whether it's Christmas or not. I mean, certainly I don't see transactions happening on public holidays, but I also don't see the typical exodus of real estate agents heading off overseas to Bali or wherever they go at Christmas, because I think, A, we can't leave the country, B, we can't leave the state, and C, people didn't earn money for 3 months, so it's just making up for lost time.
Yeah, often find that holiday period over Christmas is actually quite a busy time for our business, because people at leisure have quite often holidaying in sexy places on the coast, maybe the Gold Coast, Byron Bay. They go out and tie kick real estate and they get excited. So the scenario this time is people not able to go to those places, but at home, but still having time. And perhaps we'll be doing the same thing. They'll be doing at least some tie kicking of real estate.
Well, certainly realestate.com. I mean, the hits on realestate.com went through the roof. I think they're up 30% same time last year, because while everyone was in lockdown and there are people that, had been stood down with work, or their hours were cut, or they'd lost their jobs. I mean, people were filling in time and maybe doing research that they hadn't previously done. So, yeah, and again, come back to first home buyers. We've got the lowest interest rates in decades, and, people are really taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't you, for what you can borrow now, 2.5, 2.7%, like, it's insane. It's so low. It's fantastic, but that's where we're seeing the surge in home buyers taking opportunity there.
And the rhetoric from the Reserve Bank indicates that it's not likely to change a great deal in the next 2 or 3 years. That's what they're indicating. So it's a period. It's not just a now situation. Interest rates are set to remain low for the foreseeable future, which means that people can feel confident about their repayments for at least the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and the ability maybe to fix interest rates at some point down the track if they want a little bit more certainty, just so they can manage their budgets. I mean, look, even again, some of the clients that I've got sitting holding off on the investing side, the reality is, they may or may not necessarily have a job in time to come, but if they've got a buffer of money, if they're borrowing at a really low interest rate, if the yield they're getting is higher than that, and it's a good property that's going to attract an A-grade tenant, and it's going to become self-funding to a degree, it's no different to, whether you're renting or you've got a mortgage. We all still need a roof over our head, unless you're able to move back with mum and dad, and, you can avoid that expense altogether. But for those who are prepared to make evidence-based informed decisions, for those people who are prepared to make sure they've got a buffer of money always available for situations exactly like what we've gone through for the last 6 months, and the people I think who have survived have had that buffer of money to fall back on, it's going to be a good time to invest, definitely.
Yeah, so a time of opportunity from a number of perspectives.
Yes, yeah. But again, right property, right attributes, right price. A good property, an A-grade property, usually doesn't come at a discount. It's the bad properties that come at a discount, and you just have to be really careful about buying something because it's cheap or it's, you know, heavily price reduced. And again, the quality of property, you know, there's a massive distinction around how properties are built. You know, I'm seeing a lot of new townhouses coming out onto the market, and some have got better fit outs and better quality fixtures and fittings and amenity and so forth than others. And that's reflected in the price that you want to pay for it as well. So there's a big difference between a quality build and a poor quality build, and the headaches that you're going to have that come with it. And, you know, the issues that tenants might suffer as a result with a poor quality build.
Okay. So you have some offers to make to people?
Yeah, so definitely for anyone looking to buy a home or an investment property, on my website, if you go to propertymavens.com.au, there's a resources tab. Just click where it says free property guides, and then you can download a free guide. More so now than ever, I really would encourage first home buyers in particular to buy a copy of my book. Now, you can actually go on my website again under the resources section, and under the price, if you don't want a hard copy, you can actually click on the link that will take you to the Kindle version on Amazon. It's only $3.99. There are tips and tricks in there about, well, certainly tips on what to be wary of if you're dealing directly with selling agents, and then it explains all the negotiation, the auction bidding and all of that. There are some tips in there around making sure that you're buying a home that's fundamentally a really strong asset in its own right, because you're going to totally be dependent upon this property performing well into the future. So I'd really encourage anyone buying an investment property or a home for the first time to download my book and read it, because that $3.99 could seriously save you making a mistake worth hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're not going to be able to potentially recover from. You've got one chance to get it right. So, you know, I encourage as many people to read that book as possible. And Terry, you've read the book, you know and understand what I'm talking to. So maybe how do you think home buyers, because I know I wrote it primarily for investors, but the principles still apply for home buyers. Would you agree that there's definitely some information in there of value for a home buyer?
Absolutely. For real estate consumers of all kinds, whether buyers or sellers, whether investors or home buyers or sellers. But there are actually plenty of real estate books out there, but there's not very many good ones. Not very many that are well written and give good sound advice. This one definitely does. It's one of the best that are out there that I've read. So I do urge people to get a copy. It's so important to take any opportunity to educate yourself well. There's far too many real estate consumers out there floundering around trying to do things on the cheap. For what price did you say the Kindle version?
$3.99.
For an outlay of almost $4 to get that kind of quality information to educate yourself and arm yourself better to go out there as a real estate consumer. God, great return on investment for $4.
Thanks, Terry. And look, I wrote the book to educate consumers. You know, I'm a really strong consumer advocate. I'm very much about protecting people from making devastating and life-changing mistakes. So the book, rest assured, the book's not going to make me rich. But if you read the book and you need help, feel free to reach out. If you read the book and you've got friends or family who would benefit, you know, get them a copy. Just spread the word, because it is designed to protect the consumer. It's designed to give you as much information as possible and arm you with questions you need to ask of a selling agent if you're going to be dealing with them. And particularly if you're new to Australia, you haven't bought before, trust me, there's so many smoke and mirrors and things that go on. You really need to, this book will actually teach you how the Australian property market works, as well as, again, informing you of the questions you need to ask if you're going to buy a property and deal with a sales agent. And I'm not saying they're all crooked or corrupt. A lot of them are just doing their job, and they do their job well. Sometimes, you know, not all of them necessarily have as much integrity as we'd like, but that happens in every industry. And I'm sure there are buyers agents who don't have, you know, as much integrity as we'd like either. And I know, be very careful if you're employing buyer agents. There's a whole lot of what I call fake buyer agents in the marketplace, where they've all done a, you know, 5-minute little course and got themselves licensed interstate, and through mutual recognition, they're now calling themselves expert buyer agents, never having bought property before, never having worked in real estate before. And I kind of liken it to, you know, would you let an electrician come into your house and play with all the electricals when they've only done a 5-week online course, but they've never actually done an apprenticeship and they've never had someone mentor them to check that they're doing the right thing. So I've got an article under my blog called The Rise of Fake Buyer Agents. So there's a whole lot of questions on there that you can ask, or things to understand what to look for if you're engaging a buyer's advocate, you know, regardless of where you are around the country. So definitely have a look at that article as well, and better educate yourself on that too.
Okay. And I'd just like to urge people to be willing to engage professionals for advice and information. I think there's far too many people who treat real estate investment as a hobby rather than as a business, and they try to do it on the cheap. The successful ones, and they're relatively few in my experience, are the ones who do treat real estate investment as a business. They understand that you need to spend money to make money. You need to build your team before you build your portfolio. So you need to have top quality advice around you, a team of people, specialists in their fields, and be willing to spend money on that good advice, because the return on investment will be immense, as opposed to the false economy of trying to do it without spending.
Yeah, and look, what I say to clients too, because people often ask me about the price, but they never ask me about value. And, you know, you'll always find cheap, but that doesn't mean you're getting value. And the thing is, when you go for cheap and potentially inexperienced, and there are a lot of these fake buyer agents who are led to believe that they could earn enormous amounts of money working part-time 1 hour a week, and, you know, it was easy money. And the reality is they've left their jobs and they're struggling and they're not feeding themselves, and they will offer really cheap fees just to get business, but the risk is you're engaging someone who doesn't know what they're doing, and that's a far bigger risk and a waste of money compared to someone who may charge more but delivers exceptional value. So in a couple of the recent purchases for clients, I had clients pay me a fee into the $20,000 mark, but I got them a $32,000 purchase under a sworn valuation, plus I did all the work for them, plus I did the analysis, plus I gave them all the evidence they needed to understand that it was investment grade, plus I facilitated introductions to a number of experts to help them because they want to do some renovations. And, you know, so I've got my own talent bank of experts that I refer my clients to, and these are tried and tested people who I've used over the years, and I don't refer them if they don't deliver a high level of service. So, you know, investing in expertise is really important because it's highly complex. Buying a property is highly complex. So whether it's about doing your taxation and accounting, whether it's seeing a dentist, you know, even a good hairdresser. I mean, I think everyone knows, maybe not you, Terry, but a good hairdresser can make all the difference. Or, you know, would you let someone colour your hair who's read about how to be a hairdresser in a book, and again, they've never done an apprenticeship? Well, I certainly wouldn't. But
Well,
yeah,
see,
absolutely.
I made that mistake, Miriam. That's how I ended up looking like this. But just on that topic, I was recently asked to contribute to a feature in Money magazine, and the question was, if you had $10,000 or $20,000, what would you invest it in? And I think they expected some answer like certain types of shares or something like that. And my answer was, I'd invest it in advice, and with a good buyer's agent top of my list. I would invest it indirectly in real estate by investing in advice, such as a buyer's agent, because I think that's the best way to spend that small amount of money.
And if you're looking for a buyer's agent too, there's a Real Estate Buyers Agents Association. There are a number of us that are good advocates, and we're members of that association. So if you are going to engage a buyer's advocate, make sure they're a REBA member. I'm happy to offer anyone a free consultation if they're looking to buy property in Melbourne or regional Victoria. So yeah, feel free to reach out. Just again on the website there with the little contact section, you can click down there and request a free consultation. So yeah, but again, happy to answer questions if people have got them. I can point you in the direction of other experts if you need help and I can't assist you. So feel free to reach out, and you know, appreciate everyone giving their time, and yeah, being willing to have a bit of a listen and see what's ahead and what's to come with the exit from the lockdown in Melbourne.
Okay, and if anybody would like to follow up and have a one-on-one conversation, that's how you do it. The contact details on the screen. I'd urge you to do it. I really do believe that one of our central mantras that I mentioned earlier, you've got to build your team before you build your portfolio. It's false economy to do it any other way. And I urge you to make contact with Miriam and talk about ways that she can help you be a real estate consumer a whole lot better than the average punter. So thank you again, Miriam, for another wonderful presentation, good information, clues to how people might find opportunities as Melbourne emerges, thank God at last.
Yeah. We'll be celebrating tonight. As I said, I'm going to finish talking to you and I'm going to get online and start booking restaurants because, heaven knows how many people can get into a restaurant at a time, but I want to really take advantage of it.
Okay, understand completely. Okay, well, thanks again, Miriam, for a wonderful webinar. Let's do it again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Terry. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.